What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite rifle for distance right now, even over my super expensive KRG chassis build. And this is one I have affectionately named the Whisper Pickle right here. As you can see, it's green. Although I did rest on the Whisper Pickle name because it's green and gold like that, I had a ton of requests from viewers to name this thing the Master Chief. Apparently, a lot of subscribers here are fans of Halo. There are a few things I need you to understand about this build and exactly why it is set up the way it is right off the bat here. And that is, I specifically built this to run a 3-18 style optic or something very close to that. That being said, this thing is extremely capable out to 1,000 yards and probably beyond with a capable end user and match grade ammunition. And as we go through the video, I want you to bear some things in mind when we get to the cost, because for the performance and the way that this thing is set up, it's an extremely effective price point. And that's the way I'm gonna label it. This is definitely not a budget build here, but this is also not extremely expensive for the performance and the options that you are getting. So just keep that thought in the back of your mind as we go through everything that the Whisper Pickle here is today. All right, so what exactly is the Whisper Pickle and how did I test and proof this build out? Now, this is built on an ADM or American Defense Manufacturing UIC upper, lower, and rail. UIC stands for Universal Improved Carbine. This is a fully ambidextrous billet lower that's got some additional looks. And of course, you can see it is in the anodized green color, which I just thought was a really good look. The barrel or the heart of this rifle is an 18-inch Criterion chrome-lined heavy profile barrel. Now, I chose this for several reasons. Criterion is an amazing barrel manufacturer. This is a sub-MOA barrel, and it is going to hold accuracy for a very long time. I paired that barrel up with an Aero Precision adjustable gas block that in the end, you probably don't need an adjustable gas block for this build. More on that later. And then I added a chemo mount from Blackout Defense on the end because I love what Blackout Defense does. They really put their heart in everything they produce, and their muzzle devices are just top notch. And I love using my dead air suppressors out there. And again, on that barrel from Criterion with match grade ammunition and a capable end user, this thing is sub MOA all day. For the bolt and carrier group in there, I used a Battle Arms Development titanium nitride setup, which I can't really recommend right now. We'll talk more about that here in a minute, but it did really complete that Whisper Pickle or Master Chief look to it, or Don the Bishop Magic Wand, whichever you prefer. And currently it does have an ADM buffer tube on there, which was an addition from the original build because it has many more levels of adjustment in here, so you can kind of fine tune a little bit more over the black one that was on there before. Now, if you are digging the green and gold, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Not only is that gonna help me, but it's gonna help all the other Second Amendment channels out there by exposing this content to more people, because YouTube will push this video, and maybe some of those people have never seen content about stuff like this before, which helps us all in the end. And of course, your mom is gonna love you if you subscribe to the channel. Inside that buffer tube, I have a standard carbine buffer, and I am currently running a reduced power Springco spring. And again, we will get more into why that spring is in there when we talk about the bolt. As far as some of those controls go, I have a Geisley 2-stage trigger, which is absolutely perfect for a build like this. Radian Raptor, Radian Talon when it comes to the charging handle and safety selector. Overall, some of my favorite parts out there in the market. Furniture-wise, I have the Magpul K2 grip and the B5 system stock, and those are just two of my absolute favorite pieces of furniture on various different types of builds. I have some accessories like the Blackout Defense Arca Swiss adapters on there. That way I could run it on a tripod. I could also run my Coltac bags on the skeleton mount, which are absolutely awesome if you're into shooting off barricades or railings or anything like that. Makes it very, very easy to have the bag attached to your rifle at all times and gives you a great stable base. Another thing I did try out there were these MDT grind pods right here, which you can already see rattle around a lot, and we're just not very stable. They were about 200 bucks. And after using them, I don't like to really talk bad about companies, but these things suck absolute donkey balls. They're not great. In my opinion, honestly, before we go any further, if you're thinking about these grind pod things, go with a Harris, go with Accutac, go with one of the other brands, and it's just going to be a better setup. I have all the other ones, and trust me, they're just far superior. And I think you can even get some of the Atlas ones that are in the same height of this one, but they're only like 20 bucks more, and they are far more stable than these things. So don't do the grind pods. Although they match the color really well with the green, they just don't perform well out on the range. And I do have to pause for a second, give a huge shout to all of my Patreons, which are such a structure of support for the channel, but also to Optics Planet. So Optics Planet has been extremely helpful to the channel over the past several months, helping supply some of the optics and parts for various builds here. They're awesome people over there. And if you're interested in anything, I will have a build list below that has everything you're gonna see here today. And if you use code TACC or TAC with 2 C's, you might save a little bit of coin on your next purchase. And again, you can do all of your own research at the build list. I'll have everything you see here and some more budget-friendly options available for you as well. And one of the other small parts that actually made a huge difference was this little riser from SC Irregulars. Now, I've had spinal surgery before, and laying in the prone can be downright painful if you're not in the perfect position and your rifle is not completely set up for you. What I found was that this little addition back here made it super comfortable, and I was able to lay in the prone much, much longer, maintain that eye box so much better, and I didn't feel like I had been taking sledgehammers to my low back and spine all day out there on the range. So that little tiny part made such a huge difference out there, and that was part of the learning process when it came to this build. I'm sure some of you detail-oriented people have noticed that that is not the optic that was on here in some of the footage. This is the new Steiner T6 XI, which I have wanted for a very long time, finally got my hands on. But for the testing and the class and the shooting since that class that I built this rifle for, it wore the 3-18 SLX primary arms Athena BPR mill, which I can tell you is an absolute workhorse, an exceptional value, and did extremely well out there on the range in just about every way, at least for me, especially for the price point that thing comes in at, even in those crazy winds. I'll roll in some footage here, but we literally had 15 and 20 mile an hour winds out there, and we were still managing to punch through those with some really awesome ammo in the 75 grain Hornadays or 77 grain Sierra Match Kings from the people at Badlands Munitions, which I cannot recommend that ammo enough because it was so important to being more precise and punching through those wind conditions. The testing process out there began with cleaning the thing. So always, 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 no matter if it's a rifle or a pistol, clean and lubricate that thing probably more than once before you actually take that out. You've got to get all that factory stuff off of it. You got to make sure there's no machining stuff left in there, no burrs left in there. You've got to clean that thing out. So I did that, lubed it up, let it rest, cleaned it again, lubed it up, and then I hit the range. That initial process was shooting some really good 62 grain stuff through there, zeroing it in, just getting rounds through it to make sure that everything was functional, all the springs were seated, and everything was going to go as planned. Once I was zeroed, kind of had some fun, and then I really started to work with the match ammunition I was going to use for the course and what's probably going to be the specific ammo for this build, which is the 75 grain Bajo Specials from Badlands. And during that whole process of the first couple hundred rounds, what I was really looking for was the deviations between ammunition, the suppressed and unsuppressed rate of fire on there. That way I would know what my adjustments are going to be, and I could build cards either in applied ballistic or handwritten cards, knowing if I went from one ammo to another, exactly what my holds and dope is going to be. Now, a little tip for you on the zeroing process, if you want to save a lot of time and money, get yourself a bore sighter like this one right here from Wheeler. This thing is absolutely awesome. And I want you to try bore sighting at night. I know that may sound a little weird, but here's the thing. This is magnetic, so you put it on your muzzle device, make sure it's as squared up as possible and perfectly on there all the way around, and then find yourself a 100-yard place with a backstop that you can zero, and you can literally dial your optic in to that at 100 yards and probably be less than an inch off when you go to actually start putting rounds down range, because if you do this, you have to spend less time shooting and less rounds getting that perfect zero. And when we're talking about match grade ammunition, and depending on the caliber, you could be anywhere from $150, $2, $3, $4, $5.50 a shot, especially if you're hunting ammo. So hopefully you can take advantage of doing this at night at 100 yards and save yourself that time and money. Now, the day of the class that I took with Sidewinder Concepts, I got this thing out on the range. I had a good amount of rounds through it, but it was time to really dial it in on those 75 grain Hornaday match grade ammunition that I got from Badlands. And the first thing we did was put this thing on the chrono. So 18-inch chrome lined barrel, 75 grains. Average was 2901, and the standard deviation on this was, I think, like 12.2 or 12.3, which is really awesome out of that barrel, and I'll roll in the photo of that so you guys can see it. And then we confirmed our zero was as absolutely perfect as it could be before we got to work on those longer distance targets. And between the day of the actual class and then some one-on-one I did with Adrian of Sidewinder Concepts the following day, I got an additional probably 450 rounds through this thing. And that was at distances, everything from an 8-inch headshot played at like 250, 300, all the way out to 970 yards with this exact setup and that BPR mil scope from Primary Arms. So no doubt in my mind, the Steiner will do everything that scope will. But that was just a really good distance for me, especially in those wind conditions, seeing how those 75 grains performed out of this barrel. And again, the ammunition was such a huge help. There were other guys out there shooting different types of ammunition or 55 grain or something different. And when those winds kicked up, they just didn't perform as well. So anytime you're thinking about an SPR build or something, you've got to choose the right ammo for the intended purpose and the intended conditions you're going to be in. And all I have to say is after that class and some time on the range since, I was just super happy not only with the performance the rifle gave, but my skill level growth that I got after taking that class at Sidewinder, because I realized how the setup of the rifle and what ammunition you chose made all the differences in the world with the actual performance out there on the range. And I honestly just had the best time I've had on the range in so long doing this. Even though I had some misses out there, it was just such a great experience with this thing, because I have wanted a dedicated SPR or an SPR style rifle like this for so long. And I had just kept putting it off for so long because of the cost. And finally I saved my money and I got this thing, bought these parts, put it together, and I just could not be happier, because it kind of fulfilled one of those dreams or one of those like wants and desires that I have had for so long, both in the equipment and in the training as well. Now, even though I absolutely love the Whisper Pickle right here, would I change anything? And that's an absolute hell yes. So like I already said, the bipod right here, I would not go with this. I would absolutely not recommend this thing, especially when you can get an Atlas that's very similar in height and options and how it works for like $220, and these I think are like $200 right now. So not the way to go. Completed the look of the rifle, did not work out on the range for multiple different reasons. One being they're just rattle traps. Even if you tighten them up, they loosen up. It's very wonky. You can see the legs kind of bending, and then these rubber feet just came, I think one of them almost came all the way out and it was kind of stuck over, but they're already kind of tearing on the inside. Just a complete fail on the bipod in my opinion, especially for the price point when you can get a Harris or an Atlas, or even step up into the big boy, the AccuTac, which is what I chose to do after using these for a little bit. The other thing would be that bolt right there. So not necessarily a knock on Battle Arms Development Group, but I've heard this before from people that are much more skilled than me when it comes to, you know, having $8,000 sets of tools and micrometers and gauges, that titanium nitride can be very inconsistent. So out there on the range, what I noticed was I was not getting bolt lock on here, even when I was running a suppressor on it, which I thought was really weird. I made sure the arrow block was adjusted all the way out on there, and I still wasn't getting last round hold open. I had a couple short strokes, even after I had a couple hundred rounds through it. So I took out an Aero Precision bolt, I took out a Radian bolt, and I took out another kind of cheap bolt, threw it in here, and it ran just fine with a standard carbine spring and a standard buffer. I put the Battle Arms Development bolt back in there, and again, it wouldn't give me the last round bolt lock. I tried several different mags, still didn't work. So with deductive reasoning, I figured the bolt was the problem. Now, I don't know if that's just because the titanium nitride coating was an issue, or if it was the tolerances were just too different, because sometimes parts just don't play nice together. However, being a mil-spec setup, it should run just fine. And the fact that it ran fine on all those other bolts lets me know that there was something with the titanium nitride that maybe just wasn't right. So what that led me to do, because I wanted to keep that bolt and everything in there, I just got a Springco reduced power spring, and it runs absolutely perfectly now, with and without the can. Even with the can, I'm not over gassed or anything. It runs perfect. And that's just one of those things you learn with putting different parts together and different things. 18-inch barrel, rifle length gas system, reduced power spring, standard carbine buffer. And this is just the way that this one wanted to run. So it's one of those little finite things that you might have to do a little tuning. And then ultimately I realized that I probably could have gone with just a basic standard gas block on there. because the Aero Precision one is opened up all the way, and even with the can, I don't have to close it down. So I spent a little bit more money than I needed to by 40 or 50 bucks. And the only other thing that was changed is the Steiner T6 XI, because I have wanted this thing forever, and it was my birthday, so I figured why not. And I have that green anodized ADM quick release mount as well to kind of finish off the overall build, because hey, looks matter to some of us, right? But that by no means doesn't mean that that primary arms wasn't an exceptional setup for this thing, especially at the price point. But this is just how I envisioned this. This is how I want it to turn out. And this is going to live on here and not going to be changed, because I think it just turned out the way I wanted it to. How about that cost? Because that's where the rubber meets the road for this. So minus the accessories, the functional rifle here is going to run you about 2,100 bucks. Prices change all the time. There are some ways at the build list to not pay full price for things, but when we think about this for a fully ambi lower, the ADM brand, the quality, the barrel from Criterion, all the parts, the Geisley trigger, everything that went into this, 2,100 is not bad. Now, this is not a budget build. Heck, you go with a few different parts that I'll put at the build list, you could probably save a couple of $100. Now, change the receiver setup to say something like an Aero, probably save another $400. In fact, I am going to do an Aero build to see if I can squeeze the same amount of precision with almost the same optics and options minus the full ambidextrous lower. And I want to say we can probably come in right at or just under 1,400 bucks. And I will do a head-to-head between these two when I get that done. But I think it is possible. And then I will do a full video on this Steiner, because it's absolutely amazing. The only real question here is, do you like my Whisper Pickle right here, even though the Whisper Pickle's not on it right now? Make sure you guys get subbed up to the channel. Keep doing it out on the range. And remember, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. I will see you all on the next one.